The church was packed. Friends, family, and distant acquaintances had all gathered to pay their final respects. But in the sea of grieving faces, one person stood out, a quiet elderly black woman sitting alone in the back row. No one spoke to her. No one acknowledged her presence. It was as if she didn't belong. As the service went on, whispers filled the room. Who was she? Why was she here? The guests exchanged curious glances, but no one dared to ask. It wasn't until the reception that she finally stepped forward. With a steady voice and eyes filled with unspoken pain, she revealed a truth that sent shockwaves through the entire crowd. Guests echoed across the room. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others lowered their gaze in shame. But one thing was certain, no one would ever forget what she had just said. The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes was now fixed on the elderly woman, their curiosity turning into unease. She took a slow breath, steadying herself before she spoke again. "You all think you knew him," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But there's something you never saw, something he kept hidden." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some exchanged nervous glances, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The deceased had been well respected, kind, generous, admired by many. What could she possibly mean? A man near the front cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but who are you?" His voice carried a mix of skepticism and impatience. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I was someone he hoped you'd never find out about," she answered. A sharp tension filled the air. No one knew what she would say next, but they couldn't look away. A heavy silence settled over the room. Some guests leaned in, desperate to hear more, while others stiffened, unsure if they even wanted to know. The elderly woman took a step forward, her frail hands trembling slightly, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. "I knew him long before most of you did," she continued, her voice steady. "Before the suits, before the speeches, before he became the man you all admired." She let her words linger, watching their reactions. Some shook their heads, unwilling to accept that their beloved friend, father, or mentor had any secrets. A woman in the front row, the deceased's daughter, spoke up. "That's impossible. My father never mentioned you." Her tone was defensive, but beneath it was something else, fear. The elderly woman offered a sad smile. "That's because he never wanted to," she replied. "But I was part of his past, a past he kept buried." The murmurs grew louder now, uncertainty creeping into the faces around her. Some whispered among themselves, questioning whether this woman could be telling the truth. Others looked to the family, hoping for reassurance, but none came. Then an older gentleman in the back cleared his throat. "I remember you," he admitted reluctantly. His words sent a fresh wave of shock through the crowd. "It was a long time ago, but I remember." All eyes darted back to the elderly woman. If what she was saying was true, then everything they believed about the man they had gathered to mourn was about to change forever. Gasps rippled through the room as the old man's words settled in. The deceased's family looked at him, searching for some kind of denial, but his sullen expression said it all. He wasn't lying. The elderly woman's presence wasn't some mistake. She wasn't confused or lost. She was here for a reason. The daughter's voice wavered. Who was she to him? Her hands clenched in her lap, her breath unsteady. The weight of not knowing, of something being kept from her all these years, was almost unbearable. The elderly woman exhaled slowly, as if she had been carrying this burden for far too long. "I was someone he loved, once, someone he left behind." A stunned silence filled the room. Some guests shifted in their seats, while others held their breath. The image they had of the man in the casket was starting to blur. "I never wanted to come here," she admitted, her voice softer now. I told myself I would leave the past where it was. But when I heard he was gone, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. A man near the back shook his head. This doesn't make any sense. He never spoke about another woman. His wife. He hesitated, glancing at the grieving widow, who sat frozen, her hands gripping the edges of her dress. The elderly woman's gaze softened as she turned to the widow. He never told you, did he? Her voice carried a deep sadness. There was a time, long before you, when he made promises, ones he never kept. The widow's lip trembled, but she didn't speak. The daughter swallowed hard, looking between the woman and her mother. Someone finally asked the question lingering in everyone's mind. Why now? Why tell us this today? The elderly woman's eyes darkened. Because the truth doesn't die just because someone does. A hushed murmur filled the space. Everyone knew they were moments away from hearing something that would change everything. A heavy silence stretched through the room, thick with unspoken questions. The elderly woman held their gazes, her expression unreadable, as if debating how much more to reveal. But then she took a slow breath and spoke again. "There's something else," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Something he kept from all of you, but especially from his family." The widow stiffened. The daughter's hands curled into fists. The air felt charged, as if the truth was clawing its way to the surface. The elderly woman hesitated for just a moment before continuing. "I wasn't just someone from his past," she admitted. "I wasn't just a secret. I was." She paused, her voice catching. Then she looked directly at the daughter. "I was supposed to be asterisk, his wife asterisk." Gasps filled the room. The daughter's face paled. That can't be true," she stammered. The elderly woman's eyes glistened with old, buried pain. "He loved me. We were engaged. But one day, without warning, he left. No explanation. No goodbye. He disappeared and built a new life." The widow's breath hitched. Her hands trembled, but she didn't say a word. The daughter looked at her, searching for some kind of reassurance, but there was none. A man near the back scoffed. "You expect us to believe that." His voice was laced with doubt, but there was fear in his eyes too, the fear that she might be telling the truth. The elderly woman's lips pressed together, then she reached into her bag. Slowly, she pulled out something small, something old. She held it up for everyone to see, a faded photograph of a young man, smiling with his arm wrapped tightly around a woman. Asterisk or asterisk. The room erupted in whispers. Some guests stood, straining to get a better look. The resemblance was unmistakable. The man in the photograph was him. The widow's voice finally broke through the noise. "Why are you telling us this asterisk now asterisk?" The elderly woman's eyes darkened. "Because I wasn't the only one he left behind." The daughter's breath caught. "What do you mean?" The elderly woman's next words sent a chill through the room. "He had another child, and they're here today." The room froze. Every whispered conversation, every skeptical glance, every quiet breath came to a halt. The daughter's face twisted in disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible." The elderly woman's gaze remained steady. "It is," she said softly. "And they're here, right now." The guests turned, scanning the crowd, searching for the hidden truth among them. Some looked at one another, wondering if it could be someone they knew. The tension was unbearable. Then from the back of the room, a figure slowly stepped forward. A man, young, but with familiar features. The same strong jawline. The same sharp eyes. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd as people recognized it. He asterisk looked asterisk like the deceased. The daughter's breath came out in short, shaky bursts. Who are you?" she managed to ask. The young man hesitated, then met her eyes. "I'm his son," he said simply.